wanted to start by showing you what we're talking about. So if we could play that first, I'll introduce you to who our guest is, and then we'll talk a bit about what we'll talk about in just a moment. Nicole, you're laughing. Good morning, Nicole
I
Brooks.
am. Good morning.
Good to have you. I wanted to put this into total context so that everyone
Please.
understands what we're talking about here. We're talking about a production that you brought to Carifesta, and you're right now overseas, but you brought this production to Carifesta that looks at a time in the life in Salem, Massachusetts. It's a story that is well known in the USA, but it affects people of color, it affects slaves, it affects our ancestors, it affects us. And so you took a totally different approach to telling that story yet again, so lest we forget. And I'm sure they will tell me in my ear when we'll do so. So talk to me a little bit about what happened in Salem, Massachusetts in the late 1690s.
That's correct. First, I do have to say that we were post Carifesta. Unfortunately, we were not a part of the festival, but we carried on the festivities the following weekend, and the production was invited and supported by UE, the Department of Culture, Creative and Performing Arts. My link to that department is Andrew Millington, and we were then supported by the NCF, which was really wonderful because I knew that they were at capacity doing Carifesta. And a whole bunch of Bajans came on board. We had Dr. John Hunt from Progeny Dance, who quickly became the producer. And we had an on-ground fixer. Her name is Tisha Smith-Guthrie, so part of the production. So I just wanted to put that into context.
Yes.
And we had a marvelous time.
Oh,
and
that's wonderful.
You're right by saying, sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And you're right by saying that I brought to life the most famous witch hunt in the Americas, the Salem witch trials in 1692. And what was most important to me was bringing back the most a famous historical figure, in my opinion, who was the first accused. Her name was Tituba, and she was an enslaved woman from Barbados who
Mhm.
set this witch trial ablaze.
Talk about that, because we hear witch hunt and we hear the word witch and we think, oh my gosh, this sounds like spiritualism. I don't want to deal with that kind of thing. And we get scared to talk about it. So talk to me about what happened and why she was so central to the change that was eventually realized.
You know, by historical account, most people are familiar with the story of the Salem witch trials through the famous play, The Crucible,
Hmm.
by Mr. Arthur Miller. And when I looked at it, all accounts show that Tituba was the first accused. When I started to research, quite fascinated with this historical figure, I learned that there was more Caribbean women in Salem. And the reason why I knew that is that in the historical documents that I found, they use the term Obeah. And we know that the term Obeah is not an American
Hmm.
word, it's
Hmm.
a Caribbean word. And apparently, she was accused of doing Obeah acts, which then caused a lot of fury in that town.
Hmm.
But for me, I wanted to debunk the negative connotation of the word Obeah because that word was demonized by our colonizers of anything that we used from our culture. So again, remember, we're talking 1692, not the famous era of slavery, which is 1800s. We're going
Hmm.
back well over 100 years before that time. And where I saw what she was accused of was women who maybe used herbs for healing,
Hmm.
midwifery, those type of things that we know our grandmothers do. It's naturally. So that is why I entitled my work Obeah Opera, to help debunk that negative connotation that comes, which of course we know Obeah is indicative and interchangeable with the word witchcraft.
Yes. And so it was about the dampening down of our culture, of our cultural norms, the things that made us who we are. And all she wanted, and all the people of that time and that space wanted to do, was to do what they were familiar doing. And so the colonizers couldn't understand it, and so they began to label it. They began to give it
Correct.
negative connotations. And so as a consequence, there was this fight. There were these trials, and those trials resulted in people losing lives. And so a whole community of people rose up to say, hold on for a second. There was a bit of resistance, in other words. So let's talk about that and what those trials brought out of the human condition and the human spirit of people of our ancestry.
Well, again, to contextualize, you're absolutely correct. And I love how you're phrasing it. But the first thing I wanted to say is that when you look up the Salem witch trials, it does appear to be a white woman's plight. We are erased from that history or overlooked. So people usually know the name Tituba, but as I said again, there were other Caribbean women in that town who were also accused. So I'm telling the story through song and dance, through the vantage point of these Black women, recounting this very historical, famous time period.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, you are absolutely correct. Our practices were demonized. Now, you have to remember too, Christianity is a very young religion in comparison to, say, Judaism,
Yes.
Muslim, or what have you. Right. And we also know in the Caribbean, I believe, particularly in Jamaica, but I believe also in Barbados, there was a law called the Obeah Acts law that I actually believe is still not abolished. That anything that we did, whether we drummed or any
Mm-hmm.
practices,
Mm-hmm.
we could be, as enslaved people, killed or
Yes.
put in jail for those acts, right? And so for me, it really is a historical and a way to claim back who we are as a people,
Mm-hmm.
to be perfectly honest.
You called it an opera. When we think opera,
Yeah.
we're thinking of the vibratos and big voices that sing a little differently, using instruments that are different from what were a part of our cultural norm and the way that we as Black people express ourselves as well. But you took
Yeah.
that, you turned it on its head, and you're saying, it's an opera, yes, but we can also create the imagery that opera generally creates through telling our stories in the way we tell it. So talk to me a little bit about pulling that. You're smiling. You're smiling for a reason, and you came forward to the camera. I noticed, and so talk to me about pulling this together. First of all, and finding those voices that are powerful, the people who can share the emotion, who can help you translate that story to come together in an opera using the different expressions that you use in it.
You know, I'm enjoying my conversation with you this morning. You're
Bless you.
really encapsulating what I've done. Now, again, the title of the work is called Obeah Opera, two five-letter words that start with O that are controversial.
Hmm.
The reason why opera is controversial is that people are like, wait a minute, is this a European
Yes.
classically sound work? And I'm like, no. In layman terms, opera means simply a play that is sung.
Hmm.
So a lot of famous musicals aren't coined as operas, but I can say Les Miserables
Hmm.
is an opera. Evita is an opera. And same with Obeah Opera. And what makes it unique, outside of it being fully sung a cappella by a group of all female cast,
Hmm.
is that I use the liberty of using Black music, and in particular, Caribbean folk music and dance, to be put on stage so that we can share our culture with the world. In particular, we have stick licking shown in there. I actually placed the oldest enslaved chant that is found only in the Barbados archives, called Masabaimi. And
Mm.
I rearranged that and put it in the work to again highlight the beautiful culture and history of Barbados. Even though the story is centered around,
Hmm.
in Salem, Massachusetts, the story starts in Barbados in a slave revolt
Mm.
to show people the resilience of Bajans of that time and bringing that over into the Americas and showing what resilience from a Bajan perspective looks like.
Wow. This is not your typical opera. It is one through the vision of Nicole Brooks. And so, Nicole, that's a cast. That's a full cast of women, very powerful in their own voices and their own skin, to be able to bring to life the story as you see it, as well as you've done your research. Let's talk about pulling it all together. And was there any resistance in terms of making this production?
Um, Always. I wouldn't just say in Barbados. You rightfully, noticed and highlighted rather that the word Obeah, especially in our Caribbean community, whether it's in Toronto or in Canada or even on the islands, they have a hesitance because of the word Obeah and the negative connotation that brings about. What I will say in Barbados, I did try and get it into Carrie Festa, but knowing how many amazing performances that there are there, I wasn't able to squeeze in on time to be a
Mm.
part of that amazing platform. But UE, the Department of Culture, Creative and Performing Arts, still extended a wonderful invitation. And my history with the university spans back to even when I began the work well over years ago. I started my research in Barbados. And my dear friend and colleague, Andrew Millington, has sort of followed me along the way in regards to knowing what was happening with the production, seeing that it had an amazing life in Toronto, Canada. It premiered, well, it actually started in 2012, but the larger platforms was during the Pan Am Games in Toronto in 2015. And then it was invited by I think the largest festival in Toronto, Canada, called Luminata Festival in 2019, and then it was set to tour first in South Africa, but then the pandemic happened. So we were able
Mm.
to bring it to South Africa in 2024, and then now Barbados, because I was determined to bring Tituba home to Barbados. And it was almost like a repatriation for me. And we had the privilege through Dr. John Hunt and through Andrea Wells through the NCF to visit the Newton burial grounds. And that to me was amazing. I said, whether anybody sees the work or not, to be able to welcome Tituba home and repatriate her in that fashion was the work for me. Now, of course, I want to bring this work back to Barbados. I want to spread that this is good news, that this is part of our culture, our history, and a way to preserve it in such a beautiful way.
It's a part of our resilience as well. And so the story has been
Indeed.
told by you. It took what for a lot of people looked like something ugly and turned it into something beautiful to show that we are such a resilient people who, in spite of everything the colonizers sought to do to dim our light, we continue to shine brightly. And that Barbadian woman led the charge. Indeed, she was a spark that kept that fire glowing. And so you've chronicled the story
Yes.
and you've shared it with the world. Now the world has no choice but to accept it,
Oh,
to
yeah.
learn from it, and to internalize it and make the change that needs to be continued through the contribution of Tituba. And
Absolutely.
so,
And may I say,
mhm,
that I actually changed the lyrics to one of the songs to say, Dimunaga call me back a me yard, Barbados.
oh,
The moon give me healing in a me hand, Barbados. Because we came home and we want to come home again.
lovely. Nicole, thank you. You brought it home to our
Thank you.
hearts, you brought it home to our screens, you brought it home to our lived experience as well. And so we are now breathing deeper, we're breathing stronger, our backbones are standing more erect simply because you've shown us what our history tells us and the truth of our history as well. Thank you so much for being a part, a channel of that truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nicole Brooks, indeed, the creator, the author, the woman who pulled it all together, the Obeah Opera. I know it scares you to hear the words, but it's all right. Look for it and engage with that work. Indeed, you'll learn a lot about yourself.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.